What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you with the Hero RB and Superhero RB, Double Hero RB draft strategy. Last week, we covered Zero RB, broke down, what it takes to build out a Zero RB, some of the biggest mistakes, some of the rules of a Zero RB. Today, we're going to be covering two other draft strategies, Hero RB and Double Hero RB, which is basically where you have an anchor running back, as it's most commonly referred to. So if you guys enjoy strategy content like this, redraft content, dynasty content, consider hitting the subscribe button. If you haven't already done so, go down to the bottom of this video at any point. If you receive some value, hit the button that looks like this. It means you like the content, recommends it to other people. Comment any of your thoughts down below as well, and we will pretty much respond to everything that you guys comment, as you guys know, if you're following the channel. So with that being said, Danny, how you doing?
Doing well. And yeah, obviously you guys would have seen the Zero RB video at this point. The main thing I will say before we go into the full strategy, before we go into the full breakdown of the hero and double hero running back strategy, is that all of these strategies, for the most part, are under the basis that you don't want to load up on unnecessary running backs, especially as we'll get into with that running back dead zone. So all of these strategies, although it differs on the amount of quality that you're taking at the top of your draft, they're typically avoiding the same thing, avoiding that dead zone, avoiding trying to catch up at the running back spot where typically you don't have access to players with the elite upside.
Right. And the last 2 years, I've won a championship in my home league, and I did it on the basis of a lot of running back production, but I didn't draft all those running backs. I drafted only a couple running backs early and was able to piece together great waiver wire pickups that led me to a championship. Like in my finals this past year, I started DeAndre Swift and Antonio Gibson, who were the two guys I drafted. And in my flexes, I started Sony Michel and Rashad Penny, who I picked up on waivers, and they were both great pickups. So if you're going to build out a running back centric or running back heavy type of team, you want to be able to piece that production together via the waiver wire in your flex spots or whatever the case is. You don't want to necessarily draft 4 straight running backs to start the draft and go with a robust RB. But we'll get into the semantics of everything. As always, you guys know what we got to do before we get into this. Let's hit the intro. Okay, so quickly, for those of you guys that are new and you don't know what Hero RB means or Double Hero RB means, basically the goal of this strategy is to get an anchor running back or two in a double hero at this position. So to properly execute a Hero RB or a Double Hero RB, you want to draft 1 or 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds of your draft typically. Avoid the running back dead zone, which is rounds, 3, 3.5, 4 to 7 to 8, and load up on wide receivers in that area. Maybe take a onesie position like an elite quarterback or an elite tight end. And then your ideal team construction by round 8, round 9 is that you have 1 or 2 running backs on your team, 5 or 6 wide receivers, maybe an elite onesie or 2 on your roster. This is my personal favorite strategy. As much as we, talked up this is the zero RB strategy last week, this is the strategy that I personally execute most often. It's also the strategy that Liam Murphy, Chess Liam on Twitter, won Best Ball Mania 2 with last year. He drafted, I believe it was Eckler. Was it Eckler and Taylor that he drafted at the 1-2 turn to win the tournament? And
I
he
believe
a
so.
couple elite upside wide receivers, obviously. Was able to get lucky in week 17 with like guys like Amon-Ra and Rashad Penny that he had on his roster as well.
Yeah, and going on this strategy, the main basis here, I kind of alluded to, avoiding those dead zone running backs. Obviously, with 0 running back, you are a full anti-fragile, target the, rounds 10 plus on running backs in that profile, if you will, because you want to try to get those upside shots later on. You're more anti-fragile when you have, one of your anchors or 2 of your anchors at the top, but the same basis as I kind of said. Fill out with elite wide receivers in those mid rounds where typically we do see profiles emerge with elite league winning leg ceilings, and be able to rely upon depth and numbers as opposed to, getting a safe RB3 in round 6.
Yeah, exactly. And I said you typically want to get your hero running back, your anchor running back rounds 1 to 3, but there is also deviations of this strategy where, if you love some of the round 4 running backs this year, like Travis Etienne, like Cam Akers, maybe you love Breece Hall or whatever the case is. There's some people doing like a, modified hero or a modified 0 where they deviate with one of those running backs. But we will, as always, as we did in the 0 running back strategy video, we are going to do a mock draft at the end of this video where we break down our mindset in a hero and a double hero setup where one of us is picking early and the other one's picking at the end of the first round. So the reason we want to take early shots at running backs is because league winning running backs are typically drafted early on in fantasy drafts. As much as we like to talk about league winners as like AJ Dillon and Alexander Madison, guys that are handcuffs. Typically, what we see with league-winning running backs are that they are drafted early because we, as a fantasy industry, are pretty sharp at projecting which running backs are going to get big workloads, which running backs are just generally good players, which ones are attached to good offenses, and all that kind of stuff. So I'll let you break down what Scott Barrett tweeted out, which is basically the wins above replacement breakdown by round at the running back position.
The percentage chance that a player that you drafted yields a 2+ WAR. If you guys aren't familiar with the term WAR, wins above replacement, basically how valuable that player is in relation to the rest of their position. And you can see, for the most part, with running back, you don't find running backs with a high win rate past round two. 29.2% in round one if you draft one there, 18.2% in round two if you draft one there. And after that, it basically falls off a cliff to 0% because obviously we'll get the odd case every now and then, but from a pure macro basis, typically those league winning 20+ point per game upside running backs don't get yielded in rounds 3 on. So the basis of taking a running back in the first 2 rounds, and kind of alluding to my point, is that your thought shouldn't be, oh, I'm taking a running back in rounds 1 and 2 because they should be, safe, locked and loaded pieces of my lineup. If you are taking a running back in rounds 1 and 2, you need them to have that upper percentile ceiling that could be a 20+% win rate back, to be a Christian McCaffrey, a Jonathan Taylor, an Austin Eckler from last year. That needs to be in their range of outcomes. Because if you're just taking, I'm going to take Nick Chubb because he's going to be, the RB8 and he's going to sit in my lineup every week. Well, at that point, you may as well just string together your RB2 with your Rashad Pennies, your Darrell Williams, your Sony Michel's, Devin Singletary's from last year, because realistically, the advantage that a round 2 Nick Chubb will give you on an actual point per game basis is not much more than those bye-week fill-ins you're going to find on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, exactly. And you brought up 20+ point per game running backs by round. Our buddy Ron Stewart tweeted this out, where the number of 20+ point per game running backs, which you guys have heard me break down on the league winning running backs video, it just shows the amount of guys that are coming from round 1, from round 2, from round 3. And you see that there's just you can't get anything in the dead zone realistically. There's maybe a guy late round, maybe a guy in the mid rounds here and there. We saw, Leonard Fournette and James Conner, while they weren't 20+ point per game running backs, they gave us RB1 level production in the mid to late rounds. But for the most part, the high end running back production is the high end running back production. The guys that we think are going to get there usually are the ones that end up getting there. And the usual case of that not working out is typically due to injury at the running back position. So if you're going to load up on running back, you should probably only draft 1 or 2 early and then fill out the rest of your roster and properly execute a hero RB. And the dead zone for running backs, as we've talked about, rounds 3 to 7, usually loaded with comparable league winning wide receiver upside, where the running back upside is higher in rounds 1 and 2, but it's not very high. And in fact, it's very, very low in rounds 3 to 7. So when you look at point per game wide receivers, 20+ PPR points per game, you can see that the bars on the graph here are a lot higher than they were for the running back position, because we typically don't see a whole lot of running backs go in the dead zone that have 20+ point per game upside outside of, maybe some of the young running backs this year, like ETN, Hall, and Akers, because of, some injury question marks and stuff like that.
Yeah, and again, for the macro standpoint, you're going to find your profiles, your league winning profiles in the first or second round at running back. However, again, as we kind of said to you, there are some modifications you can make if you are able to spot a running back profile that is inefficiently priced on the market. So last year, a big example of that would have been DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift going in the 4th round had access to that 20 point per game ceiling. I believe when he was healthy, he was over a 19 PPR point per game score. So hitting on that in the 4th round last year, although you took him in the dead zone, you recognize that he had the upside to get into that top tier running back. We kind of mentioned it. We kind of alluded to it. And I'm assuming we're going to talk about it when we go into the draft, that the main archetypes this year would be a Travis Etienne profile, would be a Cam Akers like profile. If you're just taking an Ezekiel Elliott because he's going to be the RB8 overall by the end of the season, you're not taking your running back upside shots efficiently.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're looking for a safe pick, as I talked about in the Don't Make This Mistakes video, you should be taking a wide receiver. So if you think Ezekiel Elliott's upside's, 16 points per game or whatever, then you should just draft T. Higgins instead, because that's probably his upside, maybe even higher than that in PPR leagues. And you know that because he's a wide receiver, he's probably not as likely to get injured, and he's a younger player and all that kind of stuff. And even if you wanted to go old for old, you go Keenan Allen versus Ezekiel Elliott, and you get similar upside, except way less injury risk with the wide receiver. So speaking of the dead zone, you guys can see right here, we have the 20+ point per game score. As you guys can see, as we talked about already, rounds 1 to 2, it is higher. You're going to get a higher likelihood of a league-winning asset at running back in rounds 1 to 2 than you will at wide receiver. But rounds 3 to 7, the base rate, 3.19% of a league-winning type of assets, not very high in and of itself, but 0.69 is what you got with the running back position. And as you guys can see, the win rate tables there for the dead zone running backs, 35% at running back is the chance that you're going to get a win rate above average, which is 8.33%, or 1 out of 12, which is your average chance of winning a league in a 12-man league. And then at wide receiver, it's 48%. So not only are the ceiling range of outcomes higher in the dead zone for wide receivers, the bust range of outcomes are lower in the dead zone than they are for the running back position. So the final thing that we're going to get into is like what type of archetype you want to be drafting as these league winning upside running backs in rounds 1. Obviously, it's very clear. We know for the most part, Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, some of these other guys, because they've already been league winning running backs and because we know what their workload is and we know how good of players they are, they inherently have that upside. And we know that. That's why we have to draft them first overall, second overall, top 8, whatever the case is. But when it comes to the more unknown factors that lead to a player being lower in ADP, like a Saquon Barkley, for example, like Javonte Williams, for example, one of the biggest factors, I would say, is age and uncertainty risk, like what we have with Javonte Williams, because we haven't seen him do it yet. He's still a young player, and we don't know what his workload is going to be. And this graphic on the screen here from FF Spaceman, he outlines the changes from year 1 to year 2 running backs that were drafted in rounds 1 to 3 since 2009, which obviously Javonte Williams, for example, fits those parameters. He noted that these guys saw an increase of 8.3% opportunity share, and across the board, their volume went up. So one of the biggest advantages that I've found in recent years at acquiring a league-winning upside running back in rounds 2, rounds 3 is taking on that uncertainty risk of a young running back finally getting the workload that people think he can get, but don't necessarily know. And if we knew Javonte Williams was going to get a huge workload, there's no doubt in my mind he'd probably be the 103 overall if Melvin Gordon had signed elsewhere.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because for the most part, you're going to find the highest ceilings where the most public uncertainty is. Obviously, aside from the top of your draft, unless some people are fading Christian McCaffrey because they're scared of injury. Where, in general, you mentioned these sophomore leaps, these young player leaps aren't really baked enough in terms of the ceiling range of outcomes where the market evaluates them. So a guy like Javonte Williams, people are so focused on the negative. Melvin Gordon's there. You saw the split last year, without recognizing the fact that, yeah, on average, year 1 to 2 running back, 8.3% opportunity share increase. So if we're applying that to Javonte Williams, let's say, well, last year's about what, a 50 to 55% opportunity share for
Yeah,
Javonte?
they were like almost a dead even split down the middle.
Even if we could say, a 60% opportunity share for Javonte Williams next year in what should be a top 5 to 8 offense in what should be the receiving role of a team that's going to put up a ton of points, especially in that division, you're drafting him at his floor.
Yeah, exactly. He was the RB22 in points per game last year. He had a 19.5% target rate to Melvin Gordon's 13.1%. So he sees the receiving role. He was getting the 2-minute drill snaps and some of the no huddle offense. I heard Dwayne McFarland talk about this on the Establish the Run podcast. The upside case for Javonte Williams is, yeah, he's not going to be a 80% opportunity share running back. Nobody's expecting that. But if he's a 65% opportunity share running back, as talented as he showed his rookie year in an offense that we expect to be high scoring in a division where there's going to be a lot of shootouts, so that receiving role should be very, very valuable if they're playing from behind or anything like that. I really, really love what Javonte Williams' outlook is. And the final thing we're going to talk about just on the draft strategy portion of Hero RB and Double Hero RB is the big mistake you want to avoid, which kind of Danny already talked about, which is drafting a Nick Chubb or an Ezekiel Elliott as your hero, because then you don't have that access to the elite upside that running backs inherently have over wide receivers in the early rounds. You're just drafting a running back for the sake of having a running back in your RB1 slot. And while it's still technically a hero RB, you still have one guy that's going to anchor your position. You really want to make sure that that one guy that's going to anchor your position has the ability to achieve that 20+ point per game outcome that we want out of the running back position. Because while you can fill out the rest of your team and you could win a championship theoretically with a Nick Chubb if you drafted, Cooper Kupp or a bunch of other mid-round wide receivers that ended up being very good this year. You want to maximize your chances of hitting on multiple positions, league-winning type of assets, and drafting a guy without a high range of outcomes will not accomplish that for you. So if that sounds complicated, we're going to put this into practice. It's going to be a lot easier to understand once we're actually in the draft. So we're going to head over to Sleeper right now and show you guys what we're talking about. Okay, so now we're in the draft, and what we're going to end up doing, I'm picking from the 102 spot. Danny's picking from the 110 spot. Typically, what I've noticed, just from my experience doing a bunch of mock drafts, doing a bunch of underdog drafts, is that if you're picking early in the draft and you can get one of these top 2 picks, buy modal running back or, superhero RB or whatever you want to call it, where you get 2 anchors and then fill out the rest of your wide receiver core and, your onesies or whatever, has typically been the best strategy from my experience picking from these areas. And where Danny's picking at the 110 spot, typically you can get a great wide receiver to fall to you at 110, get yourself an elite league-winning upside shot at running back with Saquon or Javonte Williams, and then in the mid rounds, obviously hammer out the wide receiver position. So we're going to aim to go probably me going double hero and Danny going regular hero, where he just gets one running back. But of course, if certain players fall, then obviously we'll change up at that point. So we're going to start the draft, see how this goes. I'm taking Christian McCaffrey. Pretty easy decision for me there. He is. I kind of flip-flop every day on whether I want him to be my 101 or my 102. In large field tournaments, like on Underdog, he's definitely my 101. But in a standard home league, I don't want to blame anybody for just taking the safety of, Jonathan Taylor a little bit ahead of him.
Yeah, so after Corey took Christian McCaffrey, we do see Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Dalvin Cook, Jamar Chase, and now Najee Harris go off the board. Now, at this pick, I could take a Joe Mixon. I could take, a Nick Chubb, whatever, at this spot. However, after Najee Harris goes off the board, we kind of outlined the fact that the year 1 to 2 running backs typically see the best increase. And not to mention, we're hearing all reports that Najee Harris should have that workload on what should be a potentially improved offense. So he would be the last round 1 running back here, given ADP in terms of how I can play it, that I would consider. However, when I'm looking at the board, I see Devontae Adams, and I know the elite ceiling that he has. Instead of forcing a Joe Mixon, a Travis Kelce over a Devontae Adams just to fill a position, I will take Devontae Adams, access that 20 point per game ceiling that he does have, and see what other running back potentially that could fall back to me. So Mixon, Kelce, Swift, Lamb go. So Swift was an archetype I was very, intrigued by. But ultimately here, my RB3 right now, you guys will see more throughout the rankings videos this offseason. But Saquon Barkley, we talked about it. If you're taking a running back in the first 2 rounds, they are going to have inherently a lot of risk given the fragility of the position. We know when Saquon Barkley's healthy, you guys would have seen the contextualized game logs video as well, that his usage, his opportunity, and the overall big play potential, receiving potential that you get with Barkley on potentially one of the best offenses he's ever played with in his career, getting access to that in the second round is too much of a discount, in my opinion.
All right, so I'm back on the clock here. It's pretty clear to me that Javonte Williams is my highest ranked running back left. I still like Leonard Fournette. I still like Aaron Jones, but I'm leaning definitely towards Javonte. Mike Evans is still on the board as well, which is kind of interesting. I almost want to play the ADP game and grab Mike Evans here and see if Javonte falls back to me. That could be really, really dangerous. Now in my rankings, I have Mike Evans ranked as my 13th overall player, and I have Javonte as my 14th overall player. So they're right next to each other. And if I could somehow secure both of them, I kind of want to take that risk, to be honest. So I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to take Mike Evans here and hope that Javonte falls back to me. And they actually did not take him. They took the other 2 running backs. So I, pretty much just got really lucky there. So I can't imagine a start this good in an actual draft. Maybe you'd be playing with some slappies if they let you get something like this, but that's an absurd start. I've never been more happy with a start like that.
Speaking of slappies, getting a 310 T Higgins. I mentioned I got my hero with Barkley, got my lead upside with Adams. Now I'm getting a T Higgins at the 310 instead of forcing, a David Montgomery there. Take your elite ceiling wide receiver.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Going back on the clock here. This is the part where if you, again, I'll stick to a hero for ease sake, because you guys want to see, a hero versus a double hero with what Corey's doing. So if I was going to differentiate and do a modified double hero running back, the 2 profiles here would be ETN and Breece Hall. If you want to take an ETN or Breece Hall at this 4-3 spot and get access to a potential, 20 point per game ceiling, given the receiving potential with Travis Etienne and given the overall volume and efficiency that Breece Hall should be able to see, I can't fault you. However, for the specific of this video to kind of fill, the hero RB mold, I'll just look at the wide receiver or tight end position. I do see Michael Pittman here, and I really like Michael Pittman this year. I have him as a mid-third player. So getting access to a guy like Michael Pittman at the 4-3, I think is going to be a phenomenal value.
Yeah, and to be honest, I would rather have Pittman than ETN and Hall. So regardless of the purposes of this video, he would have been my pick there.
Yep.
Yeah. So at the back of the fourth round here, I don't typically pick very often from this spot because I know where I'm drafting in my home league and I'm picking 111. So I do a lot of mock drafts from where Danny is drafting. So I'm used to the profiles that I'm looking at there. Pretty crazy that Travis Etienne fell back here. I don't think I could imagine that that would actually happen in a real draft, but it's definitely possible. I'm not going to draft him because I don't want to go completely robust, but I could theoretically deviate from going a double hero here and grab Travis Etienne, but I'm not going to do that. I'm looking at the board at wide receiver. My highest ranked wide receiver as it currently stands, I believe, is Mike Williams. So I'm going to go with him. And Mike Williams, I get access to big play upside and a great offense. I was hoping Judy would actually fall back to me. He did not. But I'm cool going with Jalen Waddle instead. So I'll grab those two guys
Wow.
at the turn. I got a 3 stack of wide receivers that I really like, and I was able to build out 2 elite league winning upside running backs there.
Yep, and I was hoping either of those quarterbacks were to fall back to me, but because they both went off the board, I do actually have access to Marquise Brown here. So I will go with Marquise Brown, get that upside. And in general, in the first 6 weeks of the season, we could be looking at a top 5 overall wide receiver given the absence of DeAndre Hopkins in that stretch. So starting my draft with Adams, Higgins, Pittman, Brown at wide receiver, especially in a 3 wide receiver start league, and just anchoring my running back position down to Saquon Barkley. Man, I always love how my team looks when I do a hero RB or double hero RB strategy. But looking at the board, I'm not going to reach on a tight end here. Quarterbacks, the intrigue of Jalen Hurts is definitely here. Let me just make sure at wide receiver I'm not missing out too much. I always take Elijah Moore in this spot, so I'm going to spice it up. I'm just going to go with Jalen Hurts. Typically, I
Yeah,
would go with
if
Elijah
if
Moore
I
though.
get access to any of Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow in the 6th round at any point, they're pretty much an auto smash for me. I think it's just way too free to get guys like that, difference making potential quarterbacks in that area of the draft, because all of those quarterbacks, I can make the argument, have 23, 25 point per game type of ceilings.
Agreed.
I'm on the board here, and again, like, the reason we're not going to deviate in the dead zone and go towards like running back position potential is because, quite frankly, the wide receivers in this area of the draft are just much cleaner projections than
Yep.
Damian Harris and Miles Sanders and AJ. Like, even as much as I like AJ Dillon, I can't feasibly take AJ Dillon over Adam Thielen. Like, I see way easier of a potential that Adam Thielen hits his ceiling, which is a 12 touchdown season, 1,100 yards, something like that. So I'm gonna go probably with Adam Thielen here. There's nobody else on the board that I think I can get Elijah Moore, but fall back to me. So I'm probably just going to wait for him. Hopefully he doesn't go here. That would be kind of devastating. But okay, yeah, the casual went with DeAndre Hopkins and Juju. So yeah, there's a number of guys on the board here. I like Bateman. Also, obviously, I've talked about him quite a bit. I'm going to go with Elijah Moore as my other wide receiver. I got 5 wide receivers before round 9, which is typically what I like to do. Wasn't able to get access to like an elite onesie at value because I wasn't probably going to take Lamar over Jalen Waddle. If Jalen Waddle was gone, I probably would have went with Lamar Jackson there, but not a bad start. I still should be able to get like a Brady or a Stafford or maybe even Prescott at 8-11.
Yep, I dig it. I'm going to take Rashad Bateman at the 7th round pick. Criminal value there. I would have also considered Devontae Smith, but I just like the upside case there with Bateman a little bit more. So we look at this team. Bateman should not be accessible in the 7th round. I mean, you could also argue, a Gabe Davis, Devontae Smith there. I'm not going to bat an eye with you there. But ultimately here, I quote unquote filled out my lineup, but with 5 elite upside wide receivers instead of forcing a Cordell Patterson, Ken Walker, Miles Sanders, Damian Harris type into my running back position. So ultimately here, I filled out my lineup. Well, these guys are still going to have to catch up on wide receiver, especially team 4. Team 4 is going to have to get a Hunter Renfrow, Tyler Lockett type as their wide receiver too. So I'm getting the edge there, still getting a lead upside and being able to understand that my RB2 slot is going to be filled in on the aggregate as opposed to forcing a mid-round dead zone type of pick on that player. So looking here, a couple tight ends that I feel like can fall back to me. Obviously, these quarterbacks are nice, but I do have Hurts. I'm just going to go straight back to the wide receiver well, and it's between. I'm going to go with, you know what, with the report of Michael Thomas starting on the pup, I'm going to mix in a Chris Olave here. I don't think it's too bad. Maybe a little bit early in terms of face value, but ultimately, if Michael Thomas is missing any time, he's by far the most talented receiver in that pool, apart from Thomas.
Yeah, that's not bad at all. I was hoping that Prescott would fall back to me, but this guy stacked up Schultz and Prescott here, so definitely don't mind that. I had the opportunity to stack up something here, so I'm going to grab Tom Brady at the
I
8-11.
dig it.
Got him stacked up with Mike Evans. I'm really pissed that Brandon Ayuk just went. I was hoping that he would fall. Maybe I should have went This guy didn't have a quarterback either, though, so it might have been possible he might have just taken Brady there from me. So I'm cool with that. I think, Ayuk would have been nice, but there's probably like a fall off here at wide receiver. Christian Kirk, I think, is my next rated wide receiver. I think I'm going to look at the tight end position, and I'm going to get some access to an elite offense. I don't mind Dawson Knox in the 9th round here. I think there's a chance. I know everybody's, on Gabriel Davis is like the number one, like talked about thing on every like fantasy show, every fantasy podcast, but there is a range of outcomes where Dawson Knox is the reason that Gabriel Davis doesn't have a monster season, because Dawson Knox last year was quite efficient on his targets. He was good in the red zone. There's a chance that, we get a 100 target tight end from Josh Allen who has 10 plus touchdown upside. He's going to be a top 6 guy if that happens.
Yeah, no, I don't mind that at all. I'm on the clock here, and a couple tight ends that I like that can still fall back to me. So ultimately, I'm going to go to the running back well now. We've avoided the dead zone. Obviously, typically for the dead zone, you're looking at rounds 3 to 7, sometimes in round 8, like once we stretch it out a little bit. I'm looking at Rashad Penny, Ramondre Stevenson. I like both of these options. I'm going to play the ADP game, so I'm going to go Penny with the first pick. And given the fact that Ramondre Stevenson's listed a little bit further down, he is more likely to make it back to me. So we will hope Ramondre makes it back, and perfect. I'm just going to go with Ramondre Stevenson as my other back here. And ultimately, as we kind of mentioned, although you want to avoid the dead zone, you want to target these ambiguous backfields in rounds 9 to 13, because that's typically when we see. In fact, normally the back selected in rounds 9 to 13 year to year usually outperform the dead zone running back, because we're drafting them on potential upside. Whereas with the dead zone running backs, we're projecting them based off projection and who else is going to get the touches, if you will.
Yeah, and not only that, but they also outperform wide receivers in this area of the draft too, because the wide receiver position, we've gotten quite sharp at predicting which wide receivers will be the top 24 at the end of the year. I know I put out a tweet a couple weeks ago where we have like maybe 2-3 wide receivers per season that were drafted outside the top 75 overall picks in ADP that become top 24 wide receivers in points per game. So typically the wide receivers that we draft early, and there's so many of them, right, from rounds like 3 to 7, there's just so many wide receivers that go, and that's for good reason, because we typically know which wide receivers are good bets for either, safe volume like a Brandon Cooks or upside like an Elijah Moore. So typically once you get to round 9, round 10, round 11, you're taking upside swings at wide receiver that are probably better spent at running back, because you usually, due to injury and some of the uncertainty risk of that position, you can usually get better production there. So I'm on the board right now. My quarterback position's filled out. My tight end position's filled out. No real reason for me to look at those. At wide receiver, I don't mind what I see on the board here, but I think I like what's going to fall back to me a little bit better. So I'm going to grab Alexander Mattison as an upside guy to hold on my bench for the most part for the first couple of weeks of the season. See what happens with Dalvin Cook, and I don't really need him because I have McCaffrey and Javonte Williams, but he could definitely be a contributing factor in my flex position. And the reason I love this strategy so much is because, I deployed it last year in my draft. I had Antonio Gibson, DeAndre Swift as my 2nd and 3rd round pick. They anchored my RB1 and RB2 slot the entire season. And my wide receiver position was really strong with Devontae Adams, AJ Brown, T. Higgins in rounds, with my 1st round pick, my 4th round pick, and my 5th round pick. I was able to build up my wide receiver core really strong. And guys like Alexander Mattison and, Rashad Penny and guys like that I was able to pick up on the waiver wire eventually filled into my flex spot as better production than I was getting out of my flex caliber wide receivers. So I could go with another running back here, another like Rashad White type or something like that, but I'm actually going to grab a wide receiver. Michael Gallup's so interesting, man. I just don't know if he's going to be on the field right away. I think he'd be a good pick if he was healthy, but I think I'm going to steer clear of him and Jameson Williams just due to the injury concern. I'm going to grab, because it's a deep league, 3 wide receiver start, 2 flex. I'm going to grab Tyler Boyd in full PPR. I think he's, a solid pick to have his depth. And then I'm probably done, drafting safe wide receivers after that because I have Tyler Boyd. I can pretty much swing for upside from here on out.
For sure. So looking at the board here, I do know that the guys picking behind me, Team 11 and Team 12, have 3 combined tight ends respectively, which, by the way, in terms of the algorithm, why are all these teams that have high selected tight ends taking backups? I don't know. But if this is how your league actually operates and a team is spending a top 4 round investment on a tight end and then also taking their backup in the first 10 rounds, capitalize on that wide receiver and running back value, because that should not be happening. But looking at the board here, I still have access to a couple of lead upside running backs. I'm going to take Rashad White with one of these picks. Hope one of the tight ends falls back to me. And perfect. So I will go with. Ooh, this is a interesting discussion. I will. I'll grab Irv Smith, get access to that offense that I project to take a big step with the year one under Kevin O'Connell, obviously.
Yeah, that's a good pick. See, the nice thing I like about going double hero versus going regular hero is that you are a little bit more flexible in the late rounds to take whichever position you kind of feel that you want. But the nice thing that I know about running back hit rates and wide receiver hit rates in the late rounds is that running backs do typically hit higher than wide receivers in the late rounds, like I was talking about before. So I'm gonna grab Tyler Algier here, guy that I think could maybe
Dig it.
work into my flex spot if he can command a big workload. JD McKissick is probably where I'm going to go with this pick, but I'm just going to look around at the other positions. Devontae Parker at the 13-2 is not a bad guy to go after either. His style doesn't really fit what Mac Jones does well, but we also need to bake into the fact that Mac Jones could take a big time step forward. He had a pretty good rookie season, and if he becomes, a significant, passer at the NFL level, like Devontae Parker hasn't really had that good of a quarterback since, his Ryan Fitzpatrick breakout season. So it's possible that Devontae Parker is able to get back on board and back on track with the Patriots now. But I am going to go with J.D. McKissick here because I think he's just such a great value in drafts. He was like pretty much on par with Antonio Gibson on a per game basis last year, especially in a full PPR format, which this draft would be for.
Sorry, that face I made, I just got sniped with Team 7 taking, relatively decent hero RB build. Yeah, no. Aside from wasting that pick on Stafford, I feel like Team 7 did a good job in employing a hero RB. Obviously, I don't agree with the hero that they chose, but from a structural standpoint, I think they did a good job. But looking at the board here, obviously, I wanted Khalil Herbert to fall back to me. Running back position is a little murky after Herbert goes. I do like Sony Michel. If this was, one round deeper of a draft, which it actually is, I'm just going to wait on Sony Michel. I'm going to get access to Jalen Tolbert here because ultimately here, he is a bet against Michael Gallup's health. If Michael Gallup misses, 4 to 6 games as opposed to, 2 to 3 games, Tolbert has the opportunity to work into 2 wide receiver sets. Apparently, all camp reports are indicating the fact that he has actually earned the role thus far, opposed to a guy like James Washington. So taking a bet on a third round rookie who, is an older rookie, if you will, he can step in, play that second ancillary role to a CeeDee Lamb. I don't mind taking that upside swing in the 13th round. So that's my wide receiver 7. So I'm done at the wide receiver position. Now I'm going to look back at running back. Like I said, Sony Michel is one of my easiest, slam dunks at the late portion of my draft, getting upside to potentially the goal line role for what should be an improved offense. So yeah, I will take Sony Michel.
Yeah, and I hope all the running backs don't go here because I would like another one as well. Okay, so I don't actually have a wide receiver 7, so maybe I might look in that position. There's not a bunch of guys that I love. David Bell's probably where I'm going to end up going with this pick just because I like the upside that he can present. He doesn't need to be on my roster whatsoever. I can cut bait with him after, week 3 if he's playing 10% of the snaps. So David Bell's my highest ranked wide receiver here. At running back, I think Tyrion Davis-Price is also probably a good bet. We got a report out of San Francisco today, actually, that they're going to deploy a committee approach. It's Kyle Shanahan to do that. Davis-Price he usually doesn't fall here, so I might actually just go with him. But I do want a wide receiver 7 actually, so I'm gonna grab David Bell here. So I've been able to. We'll just focus on our teams from like a structural standpoint. So don't take away who we actually picked because maybe instead of Javonte Williams, you love James Conner or something. I don't, but like maybe that's where you're at. Look at the structural build of my double hero. I got what I consider 2 huge upside swings. Everybody knows Christian McCaffrey has an elite ceiling, and then Javonte Williams, who I believe has an elite ceiling. I was able to hammer Mike Evans, Mike Williams, Jalen Waddle, Adam Thielen, Elijah Moore as like my top 5 wide receivers. Tyler Boyd and David Bell has some depth there. I wish I would have gotten an elite onesie if I possibly could have, but at the 6'11", there wasn't really any quarterbacks left, and then at the 7'2", I thought it was a little early for a guy like Dak Prescott. So I'm cool getting Tom Brady as my stud quarterback there, and then Dawson Knox again. I wish I would have gotten a little bit better of a tight end, but Darren Waller would have been probably the only one that could have potentially fallen to me at 4'11". The rest of them, I'm not going to take Pitts that early. I'm not like Kittle was never going to fall to me, and I think all my picks were too early for Schultz. Maybe 6'11" would have been okay for him, but.
I just want you guys to keep in mind here, in most drafts, you're not going to see teams that invest early in the tight end take another one. So our tight end position is going to look relatively weaker than what it possibly could be in a more competitive draft. I also want to outline a couple teams here that show basically what not to do. So team 1, I mean, this is a classic robust RB which, I mean, if you believe in that strategy, whatever, we at FSC typically think that's handling far too much risk and ambiguity at your running back position. Not to mention you're filling out both your flex spots before the 4th round. I don't think is a viable strategy. So team one, they really believe in establishing the run there. The other team that or a couple other teams I really want to point out, team 5, the first 4 rounds, if you're doing a 0 RB, they did phenomenal. You got your 3 elite upside wide receivers. You got your elite tight end, your elite onesie. All they had to do from that point is take a quarterback and smash out some wide receivers, and they would have been fine. Taking 3 straight running backs in an area of the draft where historically the hit rates, as we kind of showed, are far down in comparison to where we see the elite winning wide receivers come from, they ruined their start there. And the last team I wanted to point out is Team 12 had the perfect hero RB start. You got Travis Kelce, you got DeAndre Swift. Throwing that away with 3 running backs in the next
also
4 picks.
A 3-4 turn Gibson Montgomery is the most vanilla start to a draft I've ever seen. If they had just gone, Deontay Pittman with those picks, and then you got Kelce, Swift, Deontay Pittman, Robinson to start out your draft, then you got a real, hero RB looking. And even if you wanted to go with another running back, like, I mean, why? I don't understand why they would have went with Gibson or Montgomery over, a guy like ETN or Hall with the ceiling that those guys possess. So yeah. Break down your team real quick in terms of like the structure that you went with and stuff like that. So
for sure. So you guys would have seen that typical hero RB structure. Obviously, Adams and Barkley in the first 2 rounds. If you're a little bit more worried about Barkley and you'd rather the wide receiver spot be spent in the 2nd round, and you wanted to say go Swift and Lamb, I'm not going to bat with you. Like, that's another fine build if you wanted to do a little bit of a replacement as to what I did. But ultimately here, Adams and Barkley have phenomenal insight, phenomenal belief in both those guys being league winning type assets in their positions. Once I got my anchor running back, my hero running back, I focused on building out the rest of my lineup. Higgins, Pittman, Brown, smash spots at wide receiver, fill out my 3 wide receivers and my flex with 5 guys or 4 guys I fully believe in. Get my elite quarterback upside with Jalen Hurts. Obviously, there if a Kittle or a Waller falls to you at that 5-6 turn and you want to take a tight end, not going to bat with you there either. So it's first 6 rounds, I'm leaving with elite upside at the quarterback spot, 3 elite wide receivers that I feel like can fill out those 3 wide receiver spots, another one that could fill out that flex, and ultimately a running back that at full health has access to that league winning type of ceiling. So first 6 rounds, exactly how you should be doing it. Bateman, Olave, again, I thought I got very good value on both those guys. So I'm 6 wide receivers deep in the first 8 rounds, which is typically where I like to be for the most part, especially in full PPR 3 wide receiver start leagues. From then on, I notice I am strong at depth and wide receiver, have an elite difference maker at quarterback. I focus on upside lotto tickets at running back. Penny, Stevenson, White all have the upside to be RB2s or higher, and getting that at a 9th, 10th, 11th round opportunity cost, as opposed to spending a pick on Mitchell, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, David Montgomery, who are being taken the 4th, 5th, and 6th round. You're getting a lot more value at that spot. If they were to hit, are going to be comparable, if not even have more upside. So typically here, again, first 11 rounds, exactly how you want to coordinate it. Obviously, I'm a little weaker at tight end than I would like to be, but the value simply didn't really fall to me at any spots. Obviously, with Arthur Smith, as I kind of mentioned, if he, takes over from that injury that he had last year, he's still got upside in the offense that I mentioned. Finally, last 2 rounds, Tolbert, upside first-year wide receiver, and then Sony Michel, goal line opportunity on what should be an ascending offense.
Yeah, definitely makes some sense. Again, the late round strategy for us is pretty much if you go hero RB, you want to hammer out some RB2 potential like you did with Penny, Stevenson, White, and Michelle. If you go, double hero where you have 2 guys solidified, you can go with a little bit more of a balanced approach if you want to. But I still think, hit rates would suggest that going with like Madison, Algier, McKissick types are always a good bet in the late rounds to make, whether you're strong or weak at the running back position. So hopefully by this point in the video, you guys kind of understood the philosophy. You understood why we're going where we're going. Again, elite onesie positions always need to mix in, relative to the value that you're getting on the board, all that kind of stuff. Make sure if you guys enjoyed this video at any point, you want to hit the like button. It really helps us out. Comment any of your thoughts down below. Who's your favorite, targets in a hero RB? Who do you, not like this year? Whatever your comment is, we will answer it, and subscribe to the channel if you are new for more strategy videos, for more player analysis, all that kind of stuff, and anything that you want rankings wise from us will be available one of two ways. Either you can go to patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange to get access to our dynasty rankings, our redraft rankings, and all that kind of stuff. Or you can use promo code FSE at sign up and first deposit on Underdog Fantasy, which is our official sponsor, and you'll get our dynasty and redraft rankings manifesto for free for doing that as well. So a couple different ways you can get our rankings. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.